I call it a reset button.
Reset button.
And just having, I have found it, the most effective ones are a physical response followed up by verbal. So it might be slap your thigh or take a deep breath and blow it out. Um, I've seen some people miss a shot and it's kind of like they flick their shoulder, like they're just flicking it like no big deal. Or slap your hand, like clap your hands together, just something physically that tells your brain it's time to reset, and then follow it up with get back on defense, next play, next shot, next, or just something that moves your brain to where it needs to be. I saw that, actually, I didn't see it. I had like 10 athletes within the same day forward me this video last year during the football playoffs.
You are listening to the Bridging Impact Podcast, transforming leaders on and off the court with host Coach Furtado. Without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. Today's guest is Tami Matheny. Tami is a mental game coach, an author, and John Gordon certified trainer. Tami became a mental game coach in 2008 and started Refuse to Lose Coaching. In 2018, she became an author as well. Recently, she became a part of the John Gordon team and is certified to present workshops on the power of positive leadership and the power of positive teams. Tami, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Justin. I look forward to talking with you.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. And I want to just open it up with, because you're a second-time guest on the show, I'd love to just go with what's recently going on. And as a mental game coach, as we were talking a little bit before we got on, you were talking about the Olympics and how the elite level athletes really tap into the mental game. So can you share some of your learnings from what you were watching with the Olympics, and then we can dive into each little nugget?
Well, I just thought it was a gold mine. I mean, we're watching and we're listening, and they're saying, well, my mental game coach had me do this, or I'm working on visualization or meditation. And I just loved it. And I started reading a little bit more about what the Olympians do. And I think I saw a stat where 95% of the Olympians do some form of visualization. And yes, I talk about visualization, I preach it, I practice it. But when you have these elite athletes, these role models saying that they use it, it really helps my job in getting athletes to buy into that, and to utilize these skills. It's not just me as a mental game coach saying that these athletes need to use it. But I definitely think the self talk, and I saw a great quote by Katie Ledecky, and how her self talk actually helps her increase her endurance capacity. Simone Biles talking about her self talk and helping her overcome the mental blocks and mental health challenges that she had. And then I would think the second piece definitely is the visualization. And it's really hard to do something if you can't see it. So being able to see your performance, I take it a step further and like to tell people, it's really hard to be someone you can't see. If you want to be that confident athlete, you've got to see that confident athlete. So I could go on and on. I'm an Olympic geek and a mental game coach geek. So the two, I'm kind of like in a little sorrow that it's over now.
Yeah, I hear you on that. It was definitely on our TV pretty much 24/7 for the past 2 weeks. So we're bummed about it as well. And so I think I have a couple of follow-up questions. I want to start with the visualization, and I want to touch on it because our podcast is for coaches and parents. I'm curious, right? I think a big responsibility for us is to continue to grow ourselves. So do you practice visualization? And for those, even like myself, who have done a little bit of it, but I haven't really made it a habit, what's like the best way to start practicing visualization? Is it guided? Is it, how can we as coaches and parents start that journey?
Oh, for ourselves individually, I need to write things down. Like, what do I want to picture? And so it's almost like creating a visualization script.
Mm,
That's what's helped me. I think now, if we're talking about trying to help our athletes or our children with it, then I think it's kind of giving them leading questions. Like, think about when you're playing basketball. What are you smelling? What are you feeling? What are you hearing? So we're bringing their senses alive. And then that really helps keep them more focused when then you start to challenge them to visualize stuff. For athletes, that's the biggest drawback. Their mind just kind of, you
drifts.
tell them to go quiet, and then their mind just kind of wanders off.
Right.
Um, so I think it needs to be a little more guided with our athletes. But, as adults, I think that's how do you best learn or remember things? I need to write it down. So that's why that works for me. That may not for you or someone else listening. Write down what I want my day to look like or what I want to look like at my best self. Now, that is something I have athletes do as well. Just write down when you are at your very best, what do you look like, feel like, what are you thinking? So now we've got that captured. Now read that and close your eyes and picture that person. So that's one of the exercises I do with the visualization.
Okay, cool. So that's something that I'm more comfortable with. I think one of the things I'm realizing as I kind of go on this journey of life is I prefer writing things down as well. So
Yeah,
you're saying that it has just as a powerful of an effect if I'm wanting to write down the type of coach I want to be, if I'm writing that down versus like I have a harder time like closing my eyes and like trying to like see things, right? My mind's going a million miles an hour, just like the athletes you were talking about.
yeah. A lot of people, if you close your eyes, and I can do that, we're going to zoom off. I've had athletes fall asleep even. So
Right.
I
Right.
don't, other experts may disagree, but I don't think it has to be like what we first heard visualization, where you have to close your eyes and picture it. I can picture myself without having to close my eyes.
Right.
And I think, another thing I'll add, Justin, too, is that I think we can do the same with highlight films or videos. Because, one thing I've used with basketball players before when they're working on their shooting, like say for the summer, is to create a 1 to 2 minute reel of what their ideal shot looks like. When they have their best form, what does that look like? Making sure, obviously, you're seeing some reps of the ball go in. And then they just watch that reel over and over. So they're seeing that and getting that picture. So they're not having to close their eyes. But what it does for the brain is it works very similar as the visualization.
I see what you're saying. That's so 1 to 2 minute reel, and this, yeah, you're able to watch it, and so I think just being able to, because at the end of the day, right, the purpose of this visualization is to create that self belief, which then kind of turns into that consistent confidence. And so, can you kind of expand on you know, what are some good, simple ways for coaches just to introduce this? You gave a couple of different examples about bringing their senses alive, but for guiding questions for basketball trainers and basketball coaches or whatever type of coaches are listening to this, what are some great questions we can ask to help our athletes start to visualize themselves succeeding?
Okay. So again, number one, they got to see the confident self first, because they
Right.
can visualize themselves playing, but if it's not in that confident self, then you might get mixed results. Um, the second thing is, let's say if we're using visualization for specific skill development, maybe like a baseball or softball pitcher, then I'm asking them to describe what your perfect curveball looks like. And so they get that picture as they describe it. Let's write that down now. So now they have that script they can use from that. Or, football player, quarterback. Hey, what do you look like when you're throwing? What does your, 20-yard throw look like? Or what does your screen pass look like? So the more we break down those skills and getting them to share with us what they're thinking, feeling, seeing, then we've created that little script they can read over. Okay. I also, another piece is you can do that with scenarios. You're a basketball coach. Every basketball coach in America, I think, probably works on last second plays.
Right.
We run through them for reps, but how many times do we actually mentally rehearse them and actually see them in our heads?
Mm.
So, giving scenarios of, okay, before we actually run this play, I want everybody to picture their role, what they're doing on this play or in this scenario, and then physically do it. Another follow up for visualization. Okay, in your head, if it didn't go well, how would you see it going the next time?
So making sure that they're mentally rehearsing something specific. That way, it's not like a broad or generalized. And then whether it's rehearsing a play or thinking about that perfect curveball. My next kind of follow up question is on like internal versus external cues when playing in games, because I know sometimes like even if an athlete is thinking too much about their form in game, it can get them in their head, and then they're out of the flow state versus an external cue. So could you kind of expand on what the difference between an internal and external cue is and when to use either of them?
I've played with this a lot. The internal cues are obviously my internal.
Right.
The external, one external thing I hear from baseball pitchers is a lot is that they look at something external before they start their pitch routine because it kind of brings them back to the moment.
Right. Right.
Basketball, right over the front of the rim where I want the ball to go,
Right.
might be external. Um, but I think regardless of which ones that we're using, I have found the best success with athletes of picking 2 to 3 processes. So if I'm going to use a softball pitcher because this has just happened recently and her feedback was tremendous. She was really struggling hitting her spots. And we had her break down the visualization, like I just said. But then with the cues, I said, okay, what are 2 to 3 things that if you do, you are pretty confident that your pitch is going to be a good pitch? 2 things you can control. And she said, take a deep breath and then tell myself, see the spot and tell myself, hit your spot. And so what it did was it blocked out all of that external stimuli of the crowd or
Mm.
focusing on the result and helped her narrow in. I'm just worried about taking a deep breath, see my spot, hit my spot.
Right.
And does that answer your question there that you asked?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think just focusing on those 2 to 3 things that they can control, because there's so much in sports, doesn't matter what sport, whether it's basketball or softball or track and field, that are out of your control. And so recognizing, right, see the spot. I think so when I teach shooting, right, one of the things that they can control is finishing with their arm tall, because that helps their arc, right? So I'll just, remind them to finish tall, and that's something that they can be able to feel, right, whether they're training or in game. Oh, did I finish tall or not? So just continuing on that, talking about kind of self talk and pivoting to that. You talked about it a little bit with the things that we can control. Can you kind of expand on, of course, the importance of self talk, but maybe some of the misconceptions about self talk?
So our thoughts create our reality. So
Right.
everything that we're saying to ourselves creates or sets us up for success or failure. And so it's learning to, John Gordon likes to say, talk versus listen to ourselves.
Right.
When we listen, we think, oh gosh, don't miss or don't mess up, or what if I fail, or oh, I'm tired, or it's hot out here, or any of that stuff that doesn't help us. When we talk, we're programming our brain what we want to think, which that doesn't always mean it's going to lead to success, but it, gives us a lot better chance and percentage. I think the biggest misconception when I talk about self talk is people think it has to be this rah, rah, rah positive. And for some people, that's needed. We're all different. We all respond differently. So there's nothing wrong if that is what you need. I need more productive talk. If I missed a shot when I played basketball, don't tell me it was okay. No, it's not okay. I missed a shot, and it would probably make me a little angry. But hey, keep your hand up tall. That would have been a great productive comment to make to me or to myself instead of, oh, it's okay.
Right.
Um, So I think that's the biggest misconception. And I know with athletes I work with, they're like, I try to tell myself positive stuff, but I don't really believe it. Which, okay, then let's think productive. So you're programming your brain productively.
Right. So then now diving into kind of the Olympic athletes, you talked about how Katie Ledecky increased her endurance just based off of self-talk. And then obviously we know, a lot of us know the story of Simone Biles struggling with mental health in the Tokyo Olympics and then her overcoming those hurdles. How do those athletes utilize self-talk to increase their endurance and overcome those mental blocks?
So the mental block piece, and I think there's a reel out there. It's been on social media, but I think there is one of following her. I think it was in a training session and just hearing how she was talking to herself.
Right.
And it was saying, "This is what I'm going to do. I can do this." Because that mental block, regardless of what sport it is, you get the yips or you get the twisties.
Right.
It starts with your thoughts. And then your thoughts just kind of overwhelm you, and it actually creates that physical challenge or physical barrier. So, getting rid of the don'ts, because I had read where she started like, don't mess up, or she started fearing what could happen if she didn't hit, her, what do they call them? The motions they go through if I don't, hit my apparatus or if you fall, and started worrying about the dangers. So now I got these what ifs. So she learned to talk back to them. And if she had a what if, she changed it to another question, which I love this concept. I've been talking about this a lot. What if I fail? What if I fall? So you change that to what if I succeed? Or okay, what if I fail? What do I need to do to give myself the best chance of success? So I've moved from a state of dwelling to being more solution focused. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
That makes a lot of sense because I just had a conversation with an athlete the other night that kind of ties in exactly with this. He was telling me how he struggles with his confidence when we were in the high school season because he felt like the extra pressure, right? And it was a very competitive team, right? That if he didn't perform right, he would then not get play time. And that caused him actually a lot of anxiety and actually caused him, performance anxiety. He didn't perform as well as he could have. And he felt that. And I feel like he weighs and he carries that with him. And then now, as I hear you talking, right, it's about, instead of what if I get this opportunity and I excel, I get 10 points, I get 6 rebounds, whatever the role I had given him was at the time. So kind of helping them reframe those questions.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because we ask ourselves questions all the time. So let's ask better questions, questions that actually like motivate us or help us have success.
Right.
You know, you know, how do I do this? Or what? No, I know. I'm sorry. Why did I do that? That's a big one. Like people get on themselves. Why did I do that? That was a stupid pass or
Right.
stupid play. Okay. Ask the question, how am I going to make up for it? Or how am I going to overcome it? So
Right.
again, now you've shifted. So yeah, I love that concept of asking better questions.
Asking better questions. And then, so for those that, are, what are some other ways for that athlete that I talked about for them to kind of get over that mental hurdle, in addition to asking questions?
So he's worried about results there, the
Right.
result of playing time.
Right.
And if we really get down to every athlete that we work with, if they have a mental block, are not as confident as they should be or could be, 9 times out of 10, it's because they're too focused on results and or other people's feedback, which to me is a result.
Right.
Uh, so if we can change to things they can control, one, going back to the processes, having them focus on the processes they can control, all the little actions. If they do that, it probably gives them more playing time. Um, so an acronym that I like to use, I didn't create it, and I would love to give credit to whoever did, but I have yet. I'm on a mission to find out who
Okay.
who started this. So if you know, please share it with me. But the acronym WIN. WIN, which great concept. That's what we all want to do. That's why we're playing. We want to win. But it stands for what's important now. So we can't have two thoughts at one time. So if I have this thought of result or I'm beating myself up, wait a minute, win. What's important now? If I answer that, then I've shifted my thoughts to the present moment and I'm not dwelling on what's not happening for me or the mistake I just made. Even in my job, even when I'm not playing sports, Justin, I probably use that 20 times a day. Wait a
Right.
minute, what's important now? Let's get back to this moment. And it really helps me be more efficient.
And as you know, we were talking kind of before in our previous call when we were just catching up. We had been talking about how, obviously as creators and building our own businesses we never end with things to do, right? And so it can be really easy to go into our personal lives and bring our business into it. So that's an important, kind of phrase to help us. Okay, let's just hang out with my fiance and the dog right now, not think about the next podcast episode we're going to put out. So that what's important now is a really good and important one. I've heard a couple of different people say it. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know who the originator is.
Yeah,
But it is
it's
it's
great.
powerful, right? Because I
Yeah.
think, making sure that we stay in that present moment is a key to high performance.
I'll add to that because it was an interesting study that I'm a big tennis fan, but during the French Open, I saw some research that a French academy had studied the top five tennis players for the past, I forget how many years, and the difference in top 25. And the number one trait that stood above was how they regulate their self talk before every point starts. And that's what took them from top 20. That's the only, I shouldn't say only, but that's the main difference in being top five or top 25. And I thought that that's so true. If I know not all sports are like tennis where you have an end point, then you start the next point. But if I'm controlling my thoughts before every point starts, okay, doesn't matter if I won or lost that last point, what's important now? And I focus on how I'm going to do that, then it just makes sense that I'm going to have more success there.
Right. Right. And I think one of the things is kind of before each set, right, or after a mistake, right? One of the things that we talk about it with BTG is like a mistake response or like having a mental cue to kind of continue to move on. So can you talk about how you help your athletes develop, mental cues and mistake responses to help them pretty much to clap and focus on what's important now. That's like quickly in a game, because sometimes in a basketball game I can't ask myself what's important now after I turn the ball over.
Yeah. So I call it a reset button.
Reset button.
And just having, I have found it, the most effective ones are a physical response followed up by verbal. So it might be slap your thigh or take a deep breath and blow it out. Um, I've seen some people miss a shot and it's kind of like they flick their shoulder, like they're just flicking it like no big deal. Or slap your hand, like clap your hands together just something physically that tells your brain it's time to reset, and then follow it up with get back on defense, next play, next shot, next, or just something that moves your brain to where it needs to be. I saw that actually, I didn't see it. I had like 10 athletes within the same day forward me this video last year during the football playoffs because they had seen this video of George Kittle for the San Francisco 49ers talking about his reset button. And he actually draws a reset button
That's awesome.
up on his arm and pounds it. Now, anybody listening, I'm not telling you to pound yourself and bruise yourself.
Right.
But football players a little different. So, but that to him, he gets that physical and he's telling himself to reset, and then he follows it up by next play. So I loved it, but I love too that my athlete. I mean, I 10 different people sent it to me within like a day. So
That's awesome. That's an
yeah,
extreme example, but I feel like you could easily do like a one on the wrist. I'm a
yeah,
big one.
that's
I like the two clap and move on, but I feel like it's just figuring out something that works best for you. I think another like communication tactic that I was learning about as we were presenting to our campers a couple of weeks ago. Just in terms of communicating, it's just to say what you're doing. So I guess if there's a mistake, right, you have your physical, right, whether you're smacking your arm or you're clapping, and then get back on defense, or if you're a pitcher, next pitch, just focusing. Then it's kind of that what's important now, but you're also practicing it in a way that helps you kind of refocus to what's next.
I love that. I'm going to have to steal that. But saying it out, when you say something out loud, it's 20, 30 times more powerful than if you're just saying it to your brain. So I really like that.
Right, right. And so now let's kind of talk and shift. I think we've talked a lot about kind of the individual aspect of it, but I'm obviously in a team sport, and I know you work with a lot of team sport athletes. When it comes to kind of like a visualization for a team, like, because you don't want to have well, you do have a group of individuals, but you want to have a group of individuals. They have their own individual goals, but it's about creating that team visualization. Have you do you have any different exercises and activities and thoughts around kind of meshing all those individual ideas and goals with each other to create one collective team visualization and goal?
What I've done for a lot of teams, and it's not just visualization, but it's part of a mental warm up. We all have a physical warm up that we wouldn't feel confident without doing. So it's important that we have a mental warm up that gets us in the mental space that we need. Um, I use the acronym BRAVE. Take a deep breath. Take some deep breaths. So collectively with teams, they'll do this together, whether it's in a circle or whatever suits their space best. So everybody's just taking some deep breaths, just to regulate themselves. The R is for recognize. They're recognizing any of that talk that we've talked about, and change. Now's the time to change it, as well as their body language. So getting their body language where it needs to be. The A is for am statements. Some people call it affirmations. So, okay, I am confident, or I am great with my left hand, or whatever it may, or I am the best teammate, or whatever it may be. Then the V is for visualization. So then that's where we get in the visualization. And I've been encouraged. Some teams I work with, I'm kind of like a bench coach, so I can actually lead this. Others, I'm sharing with the coaches, suggestions. But visualizing how you're going to start that game. So, like, say, like if it's with a baseball or softball, okay. So visualizing first inning's about to happen. So and so is going to go up to the plate, and just giving them some different scenarios to visualize, and then I bring in the individual with the team. Okay, now you're the one that the ball's hit to you at shortstop. Visualize that play. See yourself. Where are you throwing it? Which I may add them actually to say that out loud as they're visualizing it. You gave me another thought when
Yeah.
you said that a while back. Um, and then I'll always want to end with visualize how you're going to feel at the end of the game. When the game is over, get that picture in your head how you're going to feel. Because that gives you you're telling your brain, this is where I'm headed. This is the journey. This is how I want to feel or think when I'm finished, and trying to get that picture in their head. And then we end with the E is energy. Energy is created by what we say and our body movements. So talk, talk and touch. We're talking, touching, getting that energy up high. Now that's our warm up. We're ready to start the game. So I went off track there, not just with visualization, but to me, incorporating all those pieces. But we can dive into more of the visualization piece there if you'd like.
Yeah, let's dive into that. Let's go. All
All
in.
right, let's dive in. So, there's endless things that you can visualize.
Right.
But if I'm a coach, I'm going to script out some things that specifically that are important that we've been highlighting in practice that I want to make sure us see, that make sure that we do. So I want us to see it. If we're basketball, if we've been practicing a certain defense, all right, everyone imagine you in your position and seeing, what that looks like. Visualize yourself running a certain play. Maybe it's a new play we've put in. That would be something. One thing I have found from athletes, they like variety. So having different things to visualize each game the feedback they've given me, if it's the same thing, they kind of start to check out.
Right.
So, which I appreciated that feedback from them because I have been doing the same thing.
Right.
So it's endless things that you can visualize before a game. I think it's important coaches as a team before they leave. Hey, before you, this is from practice, maybe before a big game. Hey, go home tonight, and this is exactly what I want you to visualize. I've seen coaches give it to them on a note card. I've seen them send it in a text thread. Um, but again, the more specific you can be, and including your senses, because that makes it real life. So I want to smell that gym or that baseball field or that tennis court.
Right. What do you see? What are the colors? I feel like that really kind of helps them, right? What does your feet
Mm-hmm.
in the ground feel like, right? What's the energy from the crowd or audio from the crowd? All of that kind of gives full picture, full context, and I think um, that's a really good way for, of course, coaches to give specific feedback for probably specific athletes. And then also, talking about, you mentioned on defense for basketball, kind of what I was imagining is, so I do something, and I hope that the teams I play don't listen to the podcast and steal this, but I like to, you know, practice a no middle defense where we force the all of the offense to the outside perimeter to take tough shots, right? So we want to keep them out of the middle because that's where we want to go in the offense. It's the easiest way to score. So I would have them, okay, imagine yourself, you have a ball handler, imagine yourself, you're pushing, that offensive player to the sideline, and then obviously adding some of those cues and things that you were talking about. So I think that's really great detail to help them then succeed.
One thing I'll add that I just remembered too, I think it is important, is not predominantly, but you need to throw in visualizing some things going wrong
Hmm.
because things are going to go wrong. And I think visualizing helps the athletes prepare their response for if and when. All right, see, you had a bad call. What's your response? See how you're responding to that. All right, we're down at halftime. How are we responding? Seeing how we respond to that. Someone scored on you. How are you responding? To that.
Right.
Um, and the athletes will say, I don't want to imagine anything bad. Those challenges happen. So if we stay away from imagining them, then we really aren't prepared for,
Right.
when they do happen.
Right. Yeah, it's realistic. There's no game in high school where there's going to be no turnovers and 100% people shoot 100% from three. I mean, there's not even a game in professional sports where they do that. So it's going to be bound to happen, and that's a skill and being able to and kind of talking about beyond the game, right? That's a skill that you're going to have to be good at in life, right? After you miss a shot, whether it's you miss on a test or miss on a job application, right? Like it's going to happen. How do you respond? And that's what I love about sports and what it can teach. And so as we're kind of entering that part of the latter half of our podcast, I'd love for you to share a story or two from the book Challenger Deep that touches on some of these principles that we've talked about today.
My favorite one, and I didn't connect this in the book, but I do think it really ties into a lot of this. Probably unheard of unless you are in field hockey. But University of North Carolina has predominantly the best program since the beginning of time for college. So it's a historical program. They had the Michael Jordan of field hockey, Erin Matson, who she won 4 national championships as a player, probably the best field hockey player in the U.S. And she goes to the athletic director her senior year, and her head coach, the only coach the program's ever had, they knew she'd be retiring soon. And she's like, I want the job when she retires. And the athletic director kind of laughed at her, like, just go worry about winning another national championship. Here
Right.
she is. I think she was 21 or 22 at that time. And she's like, I'm serious. He said, come back and talk to me after you win another national championship. He's thinking, okay, I've pushed her away now,
Right.
no worries. Well, she goes and wins. I think within a month, she shows back up at his office. And she had everything planned, like a game plan,
Right.
like, this is how I'm going to do it. I really want the job. And he said, like, okay. And he tried to push her away, but she kept going at it. And she kept showing how she would be successful. And he ended up relenting, and here he is, and he had to know what a gamble he's taking. What are the rest of these athletic directors thinking? He just hired a 22-year-old to take over the most prestigious job in America, and you had some of the top names in that sport applying,
Right.
and he gives it to a young lady. Anyway, great story, fairy tale ending. First year coaching, she wins a national championship. But I unpacked that story, and her belief in herself had to be created by her self talk. I mean, at 22 years old, I'd be like, no, I can't go talk to the athletic director. What if he says no? Or I don't have the experience. But her self talk didn't allow any of the barriers that she had. Her self talk was, how do I use my lack of experience as an advantage? How do I use my youth? I can relate to these young ladies better, maybe. And just all of that self talk kept her confidence up to go do what many people wouldn't put themselves on the line for that kind of scenario. Uh, and I just think it's just an amazing story, because I think back, and I probably still do it today, where I don't go for that big job because, they're not going to want me, or they're going to say no. But having that true belief and that true confidence in yourself comes from your self talk. Now, I've never talked to her. I would love to interview her and say, hey, what was some of your self talk exactly? But it had to be completely positive and productive, or she would have had no shot of such. She was a long shot. But I just think it's a fascinating story that we create our realities. And if you want something, your talk has to match what you want.
I love that. No, and that's so important that you have that self belief, and that takes a lot of effort and work, and the mental skills is just as much as a physical skill, and it just needs to be practiced just as much, right? Because I feel like it's tangible, right? We go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week, but when do we go to the mental gym, right? I feel like we have an opportunity to go to the mental gym every single day.
Definitely. I want to share one more, though, because
Please.
it ties into the self talk, basketball related. And I'd like to, I know you, I think you've read the book, but I would like to hear if had you heard the Stacey King Michael Jordan story
I
before?
haven't. No.
Okay, so Stacey King was highly drafted by the Bulls to give Jordan, this, power forward center that would help, because this was early on in Jordan's
Right.
career. And everybody thought, Stacey King was going to be this great player. He was struggling his rookie year, and Jordan had a game where he scored 69 points. So it was Jordan's 69-point game. And Stacey King scored 1 point that game. So afterwards, the media's kind of on Stacey because, again, he hasn't been lighting it up. And they're like, what would you say about this game? And he said, I'm going to remember the day that Jordan and I scored 70 points.
Right.
I just thought, he's being funny there.
Right.
But how great if we all could reframe those things. Yes, it wasn't the game he wanted to have,
Right.
but and I don't think he ever was an all-star, but I do think he improved after that. But if he had beat himself up, he's not giving himself the chance to make those improvements. So it's a cute, short little story, but I just love that. Like,
Yeah, it's a cool little opportunity to just reframe a game, and also kind of put it on a big spectrum, right? That game that if in scoring 1 point doesn't really define who he is, and I feel like that's part of
right,
it. Is it's just like it's a game. Michael Jordan went off. I didn't contribute as much, but I was along for the rise. So,
yeah,
um,
definitely.
that's a good one. I think my follow up question for all this talking about self talk, I think we have to kind of capture it with, I know the first time we had our podcast conversation, you talked about one of the most important things to be confident is preparation, and just to put a bow on it, that we can't just have this self talk talking about becoming a great shooter if we're not going to put the hours in to become a great shooter.
Your talk has got to align with your actions. I just said, with Aaron Manson, talk, about what you want to get that. But our actions have to meet that as well.
Right.
There's a verbal commitment that 99% of athletes have. You verbally say you want something. That is easiest thing to do, and almost every athlete can say that. But the physical commitment, where your actions actually meet your verbal, that gets down to 50% of athletes do that. That was a study done about 5 or 6 years ago. And so only 50% of athletes at any level, their physical is matching their verbal commitment. And you wonder why things didn't happen. You got to put in the physical work. It's really hard to be confident if you haven't put in the physical work and taking care of your body. That's part of preparation as well. You want to be the best player, but you're staying up playing video games till 2 or 3 in the morning. That catches up with you
Right.
sooner or later. So that the physical piece of preparation of your body, of putting in the work to get your body in shape and what it needs, it just builds confidence.
Right.
Um, but the self talk is the one that creates that discipline. If I have good self talk when I say, well, I'm gonna skip this workout. No, my self talk is like, no, you're going.
Right.
So that self talk really does feed on the preparation as well.
Absolutely. And I think it goes to your point. And I do remember reading this when I was on my John Gordon binge. And I just remember him talking about you don't want to just listen to yourself. You want to talk to yourself because, as you said,
Mhm.
especially for when we're working, I work with a lot of teenagers, right? There's going to be times where, of course you're tired. I mean, there's times where I'm tired, right? And I did a couple of camps here in July and I did not want to work out, but I was like, okay, well, there's no choice, right? Like, I'm not going to negotiate. I'm not going to listen, right? There's just no choice. I'm going to do it. So I talked back to myself and I went and I showed up. Probably wasn't the day where I was lifting the most, but I still worked out, and that consistency over time is, obviously I'm not trying to be a professional athlete anymore, but it helped me keep me in shape, and then, so I could be the best coach I can be. So, um,
So let me ask you a quick question about
yes,
that. So that was a workout you didn't want to do,
correct.
but you got yourself there through your self talk. How much better did you feel about yourself after you
Oh, I
finished it?
felt way better. I felt good. Like physically, right? Physically, you feel good. And then mentally, right? It's like you feel like you overcome like an obstacle, right? Even though it's a minor obstacle, really, it's just showing up to the gym, right? In
Yeah,
the grand scheme of things, there's a lot of people facing a lot of other obstacles. But when you can get over that, it's like, okay, I can go to the gym tomorrow, right? Versus, I always talk about it's the easiest at the beginning of the summer to go to those first 2 or 3 summer workouts. It's the easiest to be excited in the preseason. Now it's hard when you're in the middle of the season, in the middle of the summer, when things, get either a little bit boring and you're a little tired, right? That's where you can really separate yourself as an athlete, as a coach, etc.
definitely. But I'm glad you shared that story because I think that's an important piece. You feel even better about yourself when you get
Right.
yourself to do something you didn't want to do,
Yeah, 100%.
which builds
It
confidence.
does. It does.
You know,
And that's the goal of it all. So there's been a ton of wisdom for our coaches and parents that are listening to this podcast, maybe even some athletes that are brave enough to listen to this entire episode. So for those that are listening, I'd love for you to share the where they can find Challenger Deep the book, and then any other resources that you have going on, and where they can connect with you on social media.
my website has about everything from books to some free PDFs just on various topics to free confidence calendar that I share every month. And it's TamiMatheny.com. Pretty active on social media. So Twitter at Tami Matheny. I do have a parents and the mental game Facebook group. If you're a parent, please join that. Parents sharing ideas, or I give some quotes or suggestions for parents to try to help their athletes. And I do have the Confident Coach Facebook group as well. In addition, all books are on Amazon.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Tami. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I got a couple pages of notes.
Well, thank you, Justin. I appreciate what you do and for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.